40 for those students, okay? Watching you. Thank you very much, our VP, Vice President of Academics, Dr. Savory Enriquez. Now we come to the highlights, or one of the highlights of our morning, the keynote address. Our keynote speaker is someone who works at the intersection of numbers, logic, and insight, VP, right, for the area, which means he probably sees patterns the rest of us are still trying to figure out. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. David Robertson, Assistant Professor in Statistics and Mathematics here at UB. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robertson.
So good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you to my esteemed colleagues. Thank you to administration. Today I'm going to share with you, as my slides get loaded, I'm going to share with you some thoughts that I have. And some of this is about my research work, but I hope that you see there's a message behind this that goes beyond like what I'm doing and what for all of us we can do using research here at UB, here in Belize. And so here's my title. So I'll get to the top line later, but to start with, I'm talking about wide open spaces. And the theme here is that there's a lot of opportunity, and we need more people to do research, like the VP was saying. And I want to share with you, how did I get into this? So I am an assistant professor of statistics. That isn't where it started. It started way back when I was an undergraduate, and I had a project. I was taking a statistics class and I had to do a term paper. And so I got some data. And up to that point, I had been a pure mathematics student. And here for the first time, so I knew a professor with data. She let me have access to it, and I did my analysis. And for the first time in my life, I got to be the first person to know the answer to a question. And as a pure math student, you spend a lot of time proving theorems that were already proven decades ago. But here I got to be the first. And to me, that was the gateway drug. That okay, this is something I want to do. And I hope that for some of the students in this room, that maybe you'll go, you know, I like to know a secret. Like, who doesn't like to know a secret? But wouldn't you? So, next slide. So I'm going to share with you some of the research I've done since I came to University of Belize. I've been here since 2023. And some of research involves making mistakes. You make a lot of mistakes. You're going to be wrong a bunch. And that has happened to me. So I have made some predictions, and those predictions didn't come out. And so I'm going to tell you about some of the research that I've done, but just a theme has been, I take what I learned in graduate school, what I learned reading these other scholars, and I make predictions about what should happen in Belize, and then my data come and tell me a different story. A more interesting story, but a different story. And I'm going to start off by sharing some of the research that I did with one of my graduate students, Eden Newfield, earned his Master's of Philosophy. And his study was on the fishermen, or fisher people. They turned out to be men in his sample, who fish Turnif Atoll. So this is an artisanal fishery, you know, off the coast of Belize. And there's two distinct groups of fishers. There are these sailing vessel-based fishers, and they come from the Northern District, from Corozal District in the villages there. And by nature, they are in a boat. So they can fish here, they can fish wherever they take their boat. They are primarily Spanish-speaking, mestizo. In contrast to that, there's another population of fishers on Turniff who are camp-based. And these camps get passed down like through families. And so they have a place where they go and they have their fishing ground, you know, with their lobster shades and so forth. They're primarily from Belize City. They primarily speak Creole. And they have this permanency, this kind of place setting. And I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm a psychologist and a statistician. And to me, coming into this, I said to Eden, oh, there's no way we're not going to find big differences here. Any sociologist would look at this. We've got urban versus rural. We've got two different languages, two different peoples, two different styles of doing their trade. It's got to be. Yeah. And technically we found some differences, but really it was the commonalities. So what Eden did was created a way of measuring what's called cultural ecosystem services. It's an idea about what you get doing your craft that isn't just the fish that you take, isn't just the money you get from the coast. He also looked at environmental stewardship. So this is the sense of personal responsibility you have to maintain, preserve, and guard the environment as you go through it. And Eden did a quantitative survey approach, which is new, hadn't been done in Belize. The numbers came out good, but really the differences between these really different groups were not that big. That they have, what we really saw was really a high connection universally with these fishers, that they have a high connection to nature, personal growth, spiritual connection to the area of Turniff. They have a strong feeling about passing down the traditions, the knowledge, the inspiration of doing this task. And the difference is, okay, so technically one of the groups has a little bit more on this scale and another one group, but really it's more about this commonality. And to me, why was I wrong? Well, the answer is at the end of a fishing trip, they all go to the cope, they all sell their product, maybe they stop at the bar, you get the same price for your lobster, no matter how you happen to catch it, no matter what language you speak. So that was one of my grad students. I had another grad student, Victor Show. He worked, prior to being a grad student, he worked with Coastal Zone Management as the sport fishing coordinator. And he did the first ever mapping of fishing grounds around Turniff Atoll, or not Turniff Atoll, around Ambergris Key. And he's since expanded that to go all the way down the coastline of Belize. With this, he was getting fishing guides to mark on a map, where is it you fish? And then tell us about these places where you fish. And so he was able to identify flat fishing that previously had been mapped out, but also reef fishing and pelagic or off-sea fishing. And he also marked the kind of conflicts that people encounter in these regions. And because of his position, his experience, he thought he'd get some conflict with tourism activities, conflict with, with commercial fishers, conflict with construction. And you did see that, and it did depend on which kind of fishing you do and what kind of location you were. But overall, what is causing our fishing guides to have to spend more money on fuel, to have to go further on their trips, is really climate-based. That it's the seawater's gotten warm, so the fish have moved, that sort of thing. So again, kind of another, hey, we thought we'd see this, we see something a little bit different. Next, I'm going to tell you briefly about some of the research that I did on my own. So one of the topics that's really interesting to me, I think ties in with what Dr. Watler and the VP talked about, is critical thinking. So critical thinking is this thing that employers say, 90% of them will say it's important, but less than half or right around half say that college graduates come with adequate critical thinking skills. So it's a opportunity or a threat for universities that this is something we need to enhance. One of the challenges, and I just find it interesting, honestly, I'm curious about the process. How do we measure it? And I talked to a friend in the US, and so they go ahead and spend $70 per test, and they get a pre-canned measurement that is guaranteed to get you a good measurement, and all of this stuff comes through Pearson and so forth. Well, I can't afford that. So what do? So I set out to come up with a way to measure, a psychometrically valid way to measure critical thinking that will cost little or nothing here. And so I borrowed some research from Columbia. So there was a survey on critical thinking that was done there. Okay, translate to English. And I also formed a test on critical thinking using something that's available, public domain. So the Cornell critical thinking test. It's really more of a logical reasoning kind of test. I put together an evaluation, ran it, and the short story is it worked. So if you can trust that my factor analyses factored in my item response theory, item response, and everything worked out that way. And this is forthcoming and will be published in Caribbean Journal of Psychology. So I've got a way to do it. Here's the oops or the surprise or the mistake. So along the way, I said, well, I've read the papers. I'm going to, like we see so much in the literature, I'm going to predict a Dunning-Kruger effect. Let me get with the mainstream here. So this is the idea that people with the lower mastery, that they tend to have higher confidence, sort of a confidence accuracy mismatch. And this is something I researched that back in the 1990s. So, all right, it's got to work. Nope, did not. So I had an item. So in addition to assessing people's critical thinking, attitudes, and ability, I asked them, rate yourself. So compared to a typical Belizean, I am blank at critical thinking. And they had the option of going much below average, average, above average, much above average. Not a single participant rated themselves below average. So congratulations, UB students, you are all above average. Woohoo! But there was no relationship between people's ratings and their actual score. So I didn't see what I thought I'd see, but should have I had made that prediction to begin with. Another topic, and this one's particularly near and dear to myself because it's in part why my lovely wife and I chose hey, where should we go live our life? And the answer was Belize. Why Belize? Well, for us, part of the reason is this happiness paradox of Belize. So Belize, so they ranked in 2025. Last year, they ranked 25 on the planet of the 25th happiest planet. This is according to the World Happiness Report. They use a method that is particularly tied into economics. So it lends itself to econometric sort of approach. And yet Belize ends up scoring on a level of happiness or well-being that is comparable to countries that have 4 times the per capita income. Next one. So, got a little bit of graph. Sorry, I'm a number nerd. This is what we do. On this graph, on the bottom, I've got income. It's actually natural log of GDP per capita. On the y-axis, I've got happiness using the Cantrell ladder scale. And what you can see, each dot here represents a country on the planet. What you can see is there's a relationship between income and happiness in this measure, such that the happier countries tend to be on the wealthier side of things. In red here, I've marked Belize, Mexico, Central and South American countries. And what I noted was Belize overperforms, has higher level of happiness than you'd expect based on money alone. That's not unique to Belize. It's actually common for all of Mexico, Belize, Central and South American countries. So, and they do have the relationship with money. It's just a higher overall intercept here. The other bit that I did on this project is I got micro data, so individual survey responses from UNICEF, specifically from their Mix 5 research that they did here in Belize. They did it in collaboration with SIB, Statistical Institute of Belize. And this same study is done periodically across the planet with a whole bunch of different countries that UNICEF is interested in. And I started in doing what a statistician or a behavioral scientist does when we get survey data. We do some wrangling, we do some cleanup, and then I got to apply some factor analysis to verify my scales. Oops. What I found was Belize, and they have a bunch of items on the survey that should be a unidimensional measure of happiness or well-being. And in country after country, it works. Come to Belize, it doesn't work. In particular, in Belize, there's a tendency that your happiness with your job, your happiness with your income, that it is unconnected, unrelated to all the other bits of happiness. Are you happy with your family, how your friends, with your home, all of these sorts of things. So in Belize, there's a decoupling. And in that research, I recognized, so I ended up pulling the data for all of the mix for all over, and found that Belize, Mexico, Paraguay, and then a handful of other countries in Africa, that they have a two-dimensional structure to happiness, whereas typically what we think of is it should be a one factor. And that takes me to, why do I say typically we think of that there's one dimension of happiness? And the answer, it relates to this slide with the weird problem. So the weird is it's a nomenclature developed by Dr. Henrich. The finding is that 80% of studies that are published in psychology, that they're based on undergraduate students at researchers' universities in North America and Northwest Europe. And in particular, 96% of studies represent only 12% of the global population. This is a challenge for behavioral scientists. And so pretty much all of us here. One thing I note, though, Dr. Henrich is a professor at Harvard. He's from Pennsylvania, is where he's born. He got his PhD at UCLA. He is weird. So weird being Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, and so forth. So we need a term to recognize that what happens in mainstream journals or what happens in North America, that doesn't necessarily apply to us here in Belize. So next slide. So I propose a new term, so talking about países heridos. And I took, my last Spanish class I took the same year Belize became Belize, 1981, so it's been a while. I know I'm the worst Spanish in the room, but here's what we got. We got países hegemónicos, educados, ricos, industrializados, democráticos, y occidentales. That's my Spanish for today. Woo, woo. So what I propose, let's not call it weird. Let's call it what it is. It's herido. And for the people whose Spanish is kind of like mine, herido here has an implication of wounded. So that science is broke. We got to get our own science. We got to fix it up, make it work for us. Along the way, my student went to Calabash Key to go interview fishermen. I already told you about Eden. And this is something he came back from a trip there. So they stayed at Calabash Key. We have a research center. And what the caretakers told them, and I don't know that it's true, but this is what they said, we can't remember ever having a group of researchers who were all Belizean. So to the extent that's true, that's a bit of a problem. We need you guys. Get out at Calabash, get out in the field, collect some data, do some research. So what Belize needs is not herido science. We need Belizean science done by Belizeans for Belizean. Part of the problem, and this I've been a practitioner of this, that I come in, I say, I know the critical thinking literature, there's going to be a Dunning-Kruger effect. No, there isn't. Not in Belize. That's not how we do things here. I know the positive psychology literature. There's going to be one dimension here. No, there isn't. Okay. So what do? We got to go back and do the work, figure it out for ourselves. And then also, we have this wonderful opportunity. So here we have a place where we break the rule. There isn't a Dunning-Kruger. So let's tell the world about it. Let them understand that they need to fix their theories in the same way. So that's the way the cycle of science works. I make a mistake, you fix it. You make a mistake, I fix it. We just keep going until we finally get the right answer. And then finally, I want to point out this. So what research do we do in Belize? And so I did this project. This is a paper recently published. And really, Dr. DeFubab did most of the work. I just ran the numbers. But we did a bibliometric study of human rights research in Belize. So we used open source software because resources, and pulled all the research we could that's peer-reviewed research on human rights that involved Belize. What our conclusion is that in the field of human rights research, the field is wide open. It is hard to find a topic that is saturated in research when it comes to human rights in Belize. Not unique to human rights research. I think it's going to be the same with positive psychology, with critical thinking, with pretty much anything. Another challenge that we found with that is I pull and I catalog the researchers of peer-reviewed articles on human rights research in Belize who have 2 or more publications. Only one of them is from the Caribbean. All the rest of them are from United States, UK, or EU countries. That's a problem because of that whole herido. They're coming in with the wrong ideas, doing the wrong sort of things. And I kind of wish our president told me about research once where they went and they built bathroom facilities in a village. And then came back to check on it a year later. And so this was a remote village, and they had converted the bathrooms into grain storage. So they're storing their corn there. And that's what happens when herido, you come and you try to fix something that isn't necessarily broke. And you know, when I stop and think about it, the idea of pooping where other people poop, that versus a nice clean hole that you dug anyway. I got to quit talking about poop when I give talks here. But the point is, you got to have solutions. And so ask the questions that are relevant to our situation. Find the answers that are relevant to the situation. That's got to be done here. And coming back to it, it's A, a lot of fun, and B, it's something you can do. And if you become a researcher, you will have a wonderful, happy life. It's a great thing. If you learn and develop your research skills, but then you'd say, I want to make money, and you go into industry, you can also have a happy life. And what you're going to find is your ability to form a question, find a way to answer it, gather evidence, and communicate those results. You're going to find that employers call that critical thinking, and they like that kind of stuff. So if you can give it a try, do it. It doesn't take magic. We've got some great research coming up that's going to be presented to you, and it's going to look like really clever people doing clever things, because it is clever people doing clever things, but they started one step at a time. It's not magic, it's skills. Everyone can learn this stuff. Everyone can learn how to ask a question, find an answer, evaluate it, think critically about it. So, thank you.